bad news for you, friends. We don't sell gallons of gas here. In Canada, we buy gas by the liter. Now, does anyone know how many liters there are in a gallon? Yes, 3.8. So you can multiply that price by 4 to find pretty close to what a gallon of gas costs here in Canada. So that's about $8.80 a gallon. Now, Victoria and Vancouver have some of the highest gas prices in Canada, and that's because the province of British Columbia has very high taxes on gas to encourage people to use less of it and take other means of transportation. Now, as we head back into downtown, I'll point out one of the other ways they're encouraging people to use less gas, and that is the construction of a number of bike lanes. Now, we have a little bit of time just driving on this road, so this is a time that I like to see if anybody has questions about Victoria or anything we've seen or anything that I haven't covered already. So if you have any questions, please shout them out. All right, well, a little bit about Victoria. Victoria, prior to the last few years, the number one industry here in the city was government. And that's because with the provincial government sitting at the legislature, as well as 13 municipal governments, a huge percentage of the population worked for one government or another in some fashion. So government was the number one industry and tourism was the second. But recently, information technology, or IT, has really expanded in this area, and Victoria has become an IT hub for Western Canada. Now, that has really changed the demographics of the city, with many younger people and families moving here. Prior to that, Victoria had a reputation as being the place where old people went to visit their parents. Because of the mild climate and what at the time was pretty low real estate values, Victoria was a huge retirement area. People would move here from the colder parts of Canada because our winters were mild and the summers weren't too hot. But recently the population has grown more and more, and it's causing a bit of a housing crisis. Now, that has also caused property levels to rise. The city of Victoria shrank over that same period because many people just moved out of the cities because they couldn't afford to stay downtown. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see some Calgary Flames fans. It is the Stanley Cup right now. So, unfortunately, I already met two of our guests wearing Tampa Bay Lightning gear. So, yes. As a Southern Ontario boy, I am not a huge fan of that, but here we are. I have had to come to terms with many things living on the West Coast. There's a lot of Canucks fans here, as well as Calgary Flames and Edmonton fans. So we're just heading into the plaza where we'll visit the Tim Hortons. So Alex, our driver, is going to be parking the bus, but we will have to cross the parking lot. So just please keep your eyes peeled. There's going to be cars and other people in the area, so just watch out for that. Now, as we enter the Tim Hortons, I'll head in first, but you'll see two lines. One goes to the cash register, and there is a line on the left-hand side. Please take the line on the left-hand side because that will go right to the counter where they've prepared our food. I'll be at the front of the line to get yours for you, so please just remind of things to purchase if you'd like. Commemorative mugs, coffee, and the like. If you pay in cash, they will accept US dollars, but just please be ready for the fact that they will give you Canadian money in return. So if you don't want to end up with Canadian money, please use a card, credit card or debit card. So there's two other things in this plaza that people are always interested in, and that is the liquor store and the pharmacy. If you're coming from the United States, you will find the prices in the pharmacy much lower than you expect, and you will find the prices in the liquor store much higher than you expect. All right, so Alex is going to pull up here. We will be passing the Saveon Memorial Center. Now, this is where the Victoria Royals play. They are an junior hockey team that plays in the Western Hockey League. So these are the best junior players, many of whom will go on to be drafted in the NHL. Now, Saveon's Memorial Center is a relatively new arena, and it replaces the original Memorial Center, which was built here in the early 1900s. In fact, within the original Memorial Center was the first ever hockey game played on artificial ice, all the way back in 1912. And it was also home to the last non-NHL team to win the Stanley Cup, the original Victoria Royals, who won it all the way back in 1924. Now on the right-hand side, you will see some construction. There is a massive construction boom going on in Victoria as the population keeps growing, and for many years there was very little construction. So we talked about Oak Bay and their 9-story height limit. Well, Victoria, the city of Victoria, has completely relaxed their height limits, and now we are at the point we were supposed to take it right there.
Yep, so there's Pandora. So you want to do a...
No, we'll just go down. Turn right on Pandora, then go down.
You want to do the bridge?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. How are we doing on time?
8. It's just 8.
Okay.
Is it 2.5 hours?
Yeah.
So we have half an hour.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So they have relaxed the height limits here in the city. We are seeing buildings that shattered the old records. There is a 28-story building, as well as a number of buildings under construction that will go as high as 41 stories. So not very impressive if you're from New York City, but they are shocking and completely changing the landscape for many Victorians. And it is a topic of much interest as some of the older buildings get deconstructed. Now, as we get closer to the Inner Harbor, which is just to the west of us, or straight ahead now that we've made the turn, you'll see that the architecture is starting to change. We're seeing a lot of older buildings. Now, this was the former heart of the city, so many of these buildings were the first buildings constructed outside the walls of the fort. You can see dates on some of these buildings from the 1860s, 1870s, and 1880s. On the right-hand side, this beautiful red brick building is Victoria City Hall. Not very big for a city of 500,000 people, but it is the perfect size for the actual city of Victoria, which is only about 80,000 people. Now, once we cross Government Street here, we will be into the oldest part of the city that still retains its original character. So these buildings are from the 1850s and later. You can see it in the brickwork and the way that the storefronts are created. Now, many of these were built with commercial on the ground floor and living spaces up above. Some of them have been renovated into very desirable condos. Some of them still retain their original charm and are quite undeveloped. One of the few places you can still find reasonable rents in the downtown area, although they are quickly becoming an endangered species. On the right-hand side, just after we cross Store Street here, you'll see one of those creations, which is 456 Pandora Street. It was a former warehouse along the river, and it has been completely redone into very expensive condominiums. This light, you can see part of the extensive bike lane network. It has been a huge investment of the city and caused a lot of consternation and frustration for drivers, as many lanes of traffic have been changed to make way for protected bike lanes. However, as someone who lives in the suburbs, I can tell you it will take me 35 minutes to drive from my home to park at the pier, and it only takes me 45 minutes to take my bike. And with $8 a gallon gas, I can tell you I have been riding my bike more and more often. Now we are leaving Victoria and crossing over the Inner Harbor to the Esquimalt Peninsula to a neighborhood known as West Vic. We are crossing over on the brand new Johnson Street Bridge, only opened a few years ago. It is a lift bridge. It opens up on the wide area that we just patched. Now, it replaced the former Johnson Street Bridge, known colloquially as the Blue Bridge, because it was an entirely painted in blue. Now, people still want to call the Johnson Street Bridge the Blue Bridge, and so after a lot of pressure, the City Council outfitted it with blue lights, so if you come by in the evening, it will be all lit up and blue once again. Now this region of West Vic is part of the last holdouts of the original industrial feeling of the area. Now there's parts that are still the original buildings from the early 1900s. There's the roundhouse for the now closed railway, as well as a number of industrial lands, but those are quickly being snapped up by developers and will be home to condominium towers. On the left-hand side, as we come up to the top of the hill, you can see one of those. They are currently advertising to sell, but that is the roundhouse. Now that was where they would turn around the engines for the old Esquimalt and Nanaimo Railway, which ran from here in Victoria up island to Nanaimo. Now since they shuttered that railway many years ago, that railway line has been the heart of Victoria's bike network. The E&N rail trail follows the old railway path from right here in the heart of the city out into the suburbs, and if you have the leg power, over the Malahat and all the way to Nanaimo, which is about 3 hours drive north of here. So these buildings date back to the early 1900s, and soon they will be gone, as this will be a large condominium development. Now, this area became industrial as the city grew, but originally, with Fort Victoria on the other side of the water, this was where the Esquimalt people and the Songhees people would have lived. They were the First Nations who lived here before Europeans came, and when Fort Victoria was founded, the First Nations set up a permanent encampment on the other side of the water, and for many years they lived there, taking canoes and other boats back and forth to conduct trade. But as the city grew, people wanted that land, and they pushed the Songhees out and further up the peninsula. Now the Songhees Reserve is still part of the Greater Victoria area. It's about a 10-minute drive further west of here, but this area has begun recapturing some of that First Nations energy. It has been renamed as Songhees Point, and there is an extensive construction with a lot of infographics as well as some totem poles and other indigenous art down on the waterfront. This area is known as the Inner Harbor, and these condominiums have become some of the most sought after in the city. They're brand new, and everybody who lives on the other side of the building has a beautiful view across the water to the hotels and Legislature on the other side. Now, you can see your cruise ship as we pass through this gap, and as Alex brings us down to the water, there is a large opening, and we'll have a chance to stop, and you can see the whole splendor of downtown Victoria and James Bay laid out in front of you. Now, when these condominiums were first sold, they were quickly snapped up by people that wanted to have that beautiful view. Now, some of them were quite unhappy when later on the city built what is known as the Songhees Walkway, which follows the coast from the Johnson Street Bridge all the way around to the western tip of the Esquimalt Peninsula. So that path goes right outside many people's front window. And what was formerly their beautiful view is lost as they have to keep all the curtains shut, or else people are right outside on their doorstep. Now on the right hand side as we pass by, you can see a Songhees style totem pole. It's quite different in design. Beyond being a totem pole, it's quite different in design and art than the Kwakwak that we saw carved by Chief Mungo Martin in Beacon Hill Park. It's also much shorter, as the trees around here are not quite as tall as those on the northern island. Now looking across, you can see a number of hotels. That green building with the dome is the BC Legislature. We will get a closer glimpse of that in a moment. That building with the orange brick and the black roof, which is currently hidden behind that tree down on the water, is the Empress Hotel. And that small boat out on the water is a water taxi. It serves a It serves a bus-style route following along the water, stopping in many places along the coast, all through the inner harbor. So if you're lucky enough to live near the water, you can take the water taxi to work instead of taking the bus or walking. All right, let's proceed.
So is that by Blanchard?
No, just turn
Or you want to
turn right in front of the Empress, and then turn right at, so we can go past, at the Legislature.
Yeah, I mean down Blanchard and then down the.
Isn't it government? What's the street name that
We go Douglas on
Hey, look at that. Oh, lizard.
Let's just,
and then come along Belleville. Yeah,
Yes.
the ledge.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Isn't it
I don't think we
on
can go on
Taco
Wharf
Lizard?
anymore.
I don't know if we've been doing it at night, but I mean it's not nice.
you have
It's not
this?
night right now. Yeah.
Oh, then it might be quiet.
Yeah.
If you want to. That's
Yeah,
fine.
let's do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Look at all
I
that rocks.
Yes.
I don't think we'll have time.
They're gonna be starting to build here.
Yeah.
If it's 8:30.
On the left, you can see some construction that's starting.
starting.
Much of the land here is not suitable for farming because the rocks are so close underneath. And when they do need to do construction, it often involves a lot of heavy blasting. So people can get quite upset when the construction starts because every couple hours it sounds like there's been a giant car accident or somebody has dropped something upstairs. So we'll be crossing back over the Johnson Street Bridge and into the heart of the city. Now on the right hand side you can see someone waiting for the lights on their bike. Be careful if you do have the chance to walk around downtown. If you cross the bike lane, you need to be just as careful as if you were crossing the road. Bikers get very upset, and I will not lie to you, I have seen a number of accidents on this as people, especially new arrivals or tourists in the city, walk across those after crossing the road and get hit by a biker who has the green light.
Are you offering a drop off downtown?
Yeah, we'll stop at
Being that we're going in front of the Empress, we could do it right in front of the Empress.
if you can find
there's spot.
find
Okay,
spot.
okay, yeah.
If not,
Otherwise,
we'll
it's
stop at the
pretty
station.
shady.
Yeah.
flags.
Hmm?
Bakery has
Our
a
long
flag. They
standing
don't
drop
refuse.
off in the old days.
Yeah, yesterday we went through and there was like, even at 9 o'clock or whatever, there was still a bunch of cars there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I mean,
But you
I've
big
seen
man.
it where we were able to, and other times where we weren't.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as the downtown area has grown, I told you about the demographics change. There has been a real boom in things to do. Now, one of the big complaints in the past was because the population was so elderly, once the sun went down, everything was closed. People in the city would be downtown, it would turn 8 p.m. and suddenly it was a ghost town. Now, the restaurant industry is booming and recovering after the COVID crisis, but Victoria has more restaurants per capita now than any city in North America except for San Francisco.
Look at the Legislature building.
So on the right hand side you can see the seaplane terminal. You can catch a flight here to Seattle or to Vancouver. It is one of the only airports in the world that needs to close down because of whales or porpoises. The planes leave from here and they taxi through the inner harbor and take off right from there. Now straight ahead and on the left hand side after we make the turn onto Government is going to be the Empress Hotel. The Empress Hotel was designed by Francis Rattenberry in the Canadian Pacific style. It mirrors the architecture styles you can see at the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City or the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. And those were the hotels that were built to hold the people that would travel on the new Canadian Pacific Railway. Now the Empress Hotel has undergone a number of major reconstructions, the most recently in 2006.
The best tour ever by Emily, but I'll point out a few things along the way back. And she's got much more experience than me, so pick apart my story all you want. So anyway, welcome back on the bus. If you so require, there is a reading light above your head, a fresh air vent, and a flight attendant call button, but rest assured if you push that button, nobody's coming to see you. So. there's anything I can do to make this journey more enjoyable for you, please keep it to yourself. Just kidding or just kidding? Sort of.
Are you American?
I am not American. Is that a prerequisite? Yeah, I did work for Spirit Airlines, but
That's what it is.
That's right. Took they said just a Spirit Airlines training course here, so. The washroom at the back is available for $9.95 if you need it. Yeah, that's right. So we're just turning onto Douglas Street. Douglas Street is the start of the Trans-Canada Highway. The Trans-Canada Highway traverses all 5,000 miles of this great country from Victoria here all the way to St. John's in Newfoundland and Labrador. So you jump on the highway or jump on the road just down here, you take it up to Nanaimo, which is about an hour and a half north of here. The Trans-Canada Highway includes a ferry service from Nanaimo to North Vancouver. Then you go through BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and then you finally make it to Sydney, Nova Scotia, where you take another ferry, a significantly longer ferry. It's about 8.5 hours to Newfoundland. You get to Newfoundland, and it's an island just like this one. The strong exception that they have snow about 10 months of the year, and moose are the size of houses, so a little bit different. We have a sub-Mediterranean climate here on Vancouver Island, and we're very happy for that when we meet our friends from Newfoundland. On the right-hand side is the Bay Centre, named for the Hudson's Bay Company. So the Bay, as we would call it here in Canada, the oldest company in the world, established in what was Upper Canada, what is now Ontario, Hudson's Bay, Ontario, in 1672. They were a fur trading company established by the British, and over time has really developed themselves into mostly a department store. The parent company of Hudson's Bay is the HBC company, and they are the owners of Saks Fifth Avenue, which some of you might know as being a popular American chain. On the right is St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church was ordered at the same time as the Catholic Church, which is a few blocks to the east of us. The rumor has it that even though they were ordered at the same time as the Presbyterians, somehow were able to get their bricks 2 years sooner. So the church was actually manufactured 2 years sooner than the St. Andrew's Catholic Church. And as a result, the Catholic Church ended up building a spire significantly taller. And it said that that's as a result of being delayed, the bricks being delayed, they wanted to show themselves up to the Presbyterians. On our left, Crystal Gardens. It's a convention center now. It's also the home of the Old Spaghetti restaurant. I prefer my spaghetti new, I don't know about you, but that was the original pool for the Empress Hotel, which I'm sure Emily pointed out, but it's behind us on our right-hand side. I'll point it to as we go by as well. On our right, the Empress Hotel. The stone covered area is actually where the horse-drawn carriages would drop off their guests. Famous people, a lot of famous people stayed in that hotel, including Shirley Temple and Winston Churchill. On our right, the statue is of Emily Carr, local. An artist who posthumously has become quite famous for her work. She's from Victoria here. Her house a few blocks to the south of us now. On our left, the British Columbia Legislature building. This building was designed by a man named Francis Rattenbury. Victoria, BC is the provincial capital of the province of British Columbia. Right, steamship terminal. One of Francis Bradbury's final designs here in Victoria. Further ahead on the right, the Blackball ferry line is the Coho passenger and vehicle ferry that leaves here 2 to 4 times a day depending on the season. Connects local Victorians to Port Angeles or Port Angeles in Washington State. It's about a 90-minute ferry ride. Next over is the Coho ferry. That's a catamaran-style ferry that departs from here. And in 2.5 hours, we'll get you downtown Seattle. If you look across the water, you might be able to make out the harbor terminal, the harbor air terminal. So Victoria Harbor Airport is the busiest harbor airport in Canada. Our main carrier here is Harbour Air, which departs many flights a day from here in Victoria to areas such as Vancouver and Nanaimo, a few other places in the interior, as well as some seasonal destinations to Washington State. There's actually a fairly rich aviation history here in Victoria. One of the first flights in Western Canada was actually achieved in Lansdowne Field, which is about 10 miles to the north of us now. That airport closed down and is now actually a school. One of the hangars is still part of that school building. Our local airport now is up in a town named Sydney, which is close to where the ferry to Vancouver departs from. And that's the airport in Sydney. You'd find a company called Viking Air. Viking Air actually has the patent to, the authority to build classic airplanes that were instrumental in many humanitarian efforts, such as the Twin Otter Beaver, that were initially designed in the mid-1930s to late 1960s and 70s, and they've modernized those airplanes, and most of them are actually used now for humanitarian efforts for UN nations, as well as some of them are actually used for skiing. They are equipped with skis, and they're used for expeditions in Antarctica and areas of the North Pole. If you look to your right, you'll see, if you look over the hill, you'll see our Fisherman's Wharf there. Fisherman's Wharf is, a lot of people have crabs in Fisherman's Wharf. They also have fish and lobster as well. A lot of colorful houseboats in there. And it's a great area to buy some local food. On our right is the Canadian Coast Guard. So our Coast Guard here in Canada differs a bit from the Coast Guard in the US. The American Coast Guard is more of an enforcement. We are more of a search and rescue operation here. So the story goes that the Americans will seize the marijuana and we'll smoke it. With any luck, that's your ship. If it's not, I'm gonna have some paperwork to fill out, I think. I want to thank you for joining us here in Victoria. It's been a while since we've had tourists like yourself, so we appreciate you joining us here. We certainly hope to see you back soon. Hopefully next time